Welcome back to another episode of The Road to Avengers Endgame. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering two of Marvel's best films, Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. First up, we'll talk about Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Taking place many years after the events of the first Avengers film, Cap is now an operative of S.H.I.E.L.D. and is teamed up with Black Widow to go on a couple of covert ops missions. However, one day, Nick Fury ends up getting assassinated by a mysterious soldier known only as the Winter Soldier. And as it turns out, Cap is eventually portrayed as a fugitive of S.H.I.E.L.D. now. As Nick Fury tells him before he dies, don't trust anybody. So, him and Black Widow pretty much go on a very interesting adventure as they try and figure out who is the Winter Soldier, what's his end game, and how Hydra has to tie into this. Now, this was actually sort of the movie that I wanted Thor: The Dark World to be. This, from the sounds of it, is a filler. It kind of sounds like a filler plot, but the way that it's written, the way that it's directed, the way it's acted, it doesn't feel like a filler plot. It feels like it's super duper important. Now, what makes this different from a lot of other Marvel movies is the fact is that this one feels like an homage, like one of those 1970s espionage spy thrillers. It actually kind of feels, to me, as big Mission Impossible vibes going for it. And not only that, but the characters are actually fleshed out more. Captain America is perceived as a man at a time, but not in like the I don't know what this is kind of way, but like he is legitimately struggling with the fact that pretty much everybody that he knows and loves is essentially gone. And eventually we ended up see him going to visit his old girlfriend when she's in her 80s or 90s, and it's actually a really, really sad scene. And the thing is, we saw her in the first film and we really liked Peggy Carter. But to see her in this state is actually really, really sad. And not only that, but Captain America, instead of trying to stay stubborn and staying with his times, he's evolving, he's learning about several things. Like, for example, when he's talking to Sam Wilson for the first time, he's like, the internet is so helpful. I've been able to catch up a lot on a ton of stuff. And I also love the little part in which he's got, like, the list of things, and it's like, Rocky, Thai food, Star Wars / Star Trek. I really like that little list. It's actually really, really cool. And not only that, but Black Widow is also really, really good in this too. Now, like a lot of people, I really want her to have her own movie, but from the sounds of it, it appears that Marvel's actually finally getting their butts into gear and are actually making the movie. But until that moment comes, this is probably the best that Black Widow's ever going to be. And thanks to Scarlett Johansson doing an amazing job too. And not only that, but the Winter Soldier himself is actually not that bad a villain. Now, as a lot of people know already at this point, Bucky is the Winter Soldier. Now, in case you're wondering who Bucky is, he was one of Cap's friends from World War II, but he supposedly died. But it was revealed he was picked up by Hydra and was given a robotic arm. He was purged of all of his memories, meaning he had no idea who he was, and was forced to be their assassin. And to make sure that he didn't age, they would put him in cryostasis. And as Cap and Black Widow eventually learned near the middle or so of the film, they eventually learned that Hydra actually infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and they've actually been a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long while now. Which also has this great interesting idea about who can you really trust. And not only that, there's a great scene in which Nick Fury and Captain America are arguing about, the idea of these 3 Quinjets. They'll keep an eye on what possibly might be targets before they happen. And as Cap states, you see, this isn't freedom. This is fear. That's actually really, really... It's stuff like this that makes it really, really good and important. Now, was there anything that I particularly did not like about the movie? Well, I can't really think of anything right now, but my guess the fact is that it's probably got to have some pacing issues here and there, like, I'm trying to think about these types of problems that this movie has, but I can't really think of anything for the moment. Well, oh, wait a minute. The Winter Soldier, he's actually not really the true villain of the story. In fact, it's actually Hydra, which is actually sort of behind the scene, which is more of a government organization, that are actually the real villains of the story. which is a bit of a cop-out, but I will give it credit the fact that, well, that's not the point. It's supposed to be able to raise the message about who can you really trust. Can you even trust the government or the organization that you work with? That's actually really, really cool. So yeah, Captain America the Winter Soldier is a really good, solid superhero film. Great sequel, probably the best Marvel Part 2 that there is in this franchise. And it's just a really solid film. I would give it a 9 out of 10. Now we head to Guardians of the Galaxy. Now this is actually a film that I have a very personal connection to, as this was actually the first one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films I ever saw. In fact, this is actually probably my personal favorite out of all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. As I'm rewatching all these movies, I really enjoy a lot of them. Like, I'll eventually do like a little rundown list about how I think the Marvel movies are from worst to best. Like, I rank them. But then I actually have a little personal thing in which I actually state like my personal favorites. So, yeah, this might just be my personal favorite. I'm not entirely too sure. It might either be this or Captain America Civil War. But in terms of a really solid superhero film that's just fun, yeah, this is exactly what you bargained for. Now, what is the story of Guardians of the Galaxy? This follows Peter Quill. You see, when Peter Quill was young, he was abducted by a group of aliens called the Ravagers, led by Yondu. And eventually Peter was raised by the Ravagers, and his latest task is that he has to acquire a special orb. But not just any orb, it's one of the 6 Infinity Stones. And he was planning on selling it on the side because of how much it's supposedly worth in the black market. However, he ends up running into trouble when he meets Gamora, a very, very good assassin and the daughter of Thanos. Drax the Destroyer, who they meet later on in the movie, but as it turns out, his family was killed by Ronan the Accuser, and Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Rocket is a gun-toting, hyper-intelligent raccoon, and Groot is a walking, talking tree who can only say the words, "I am Groot." However, if you really... some people can be able to understand Groot like Rocket, but not a whole lot of people can understand what he's saying besides, "I am Groot." And they also have to deal with Ronan the Accuser, the big bad of the movie, as he's pretty much trying to he's a member of the Kree, but he feels like the Kree is going too soft, so he's tasked by Thanos to try and get the Infinity Stone, and yeah, it's a very complicated thing to describe with Ronan, because he's probably the weakest element of this film when it comes to most Marvel movies. The villain isn't particularly that good, but that's not the point. The point is, it's not about the antagonists, it's about the protagonists. And the protagonists are actually really fun. This is definitely one of the funnier Marvel movies that has come out, which makes sense from because it was written and directed by James Gunn. Also, really happy the fact that Disney was smart enough to rehire him for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, so I am happy for that. And not only that, but you see that originally, the Guardians, they don't get along. Like, they bicker and they argue, but when the time comes, they are willing to get their heads together and they are willing to carry out a plan and become a team. That's actually really, really cool. And not only that, but all the actors that portray the characters are amazing. Chris Pratt is very charming as Star-Lord. Zoe Saldana is great as Gamora. Dave Bautista is hilarious as Drax, because the whole idea with Drax is that he has no idea what sarcasm is, so whenever they make like a sarcastic comment, like Rocket says, you see, he doesn't understand metaphors, they usually just go over his head, and Drax responds with, "Nothing goes over my head. I have too fast of reflexes for that." It's just hilarious. And Rocket and Groot are absolutely hilarious together. Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel together are awesome. And not only that, but Michael Rooker as Yondu is actually hilarious too. Especially the one scene in which he's talking with the one guy. Him and Kraglin are talking with the one guy, and he actually improvises. It's like when the guy was talking and trying to explain what was happening, Michael Rooker improvised like he kept on interrupting the guy by saying, "La boba la boba la boba la bo." It's absolutely hilarious. And not only that, but the effects are actually really impressive too. And I'm not just talking about like the big like starship battles, although those are cool too. I'm talking more stuff like the makeup prosthetics and how it's really cool about how they're able to bring a lot of this to life via practical effects, and how we're getting to the point in which CG is getting to the point in which it's almost becoming photorealistic. Like Rocket, like there's a scene near the very end in which like Drax is petting Rocket after, spoilers, Groot dies, and Rocket has this very animalistic reaction to when, you know, Drax first touches him. That's such a small detail, but it adds so much to that scene. And not only that, but they also want to set up the fact that a lot of other stuff too, like how the Guardians, they are cool. They do set the mystery of the fact that we don't entirely know who Peter Quill's father is, which eventually does get answered in Guardians Volume 2, but we're not at that point yet. It's a very interesting mystery. And to me, it actually sort of feels like a throwback to like those old 80s space adventure movies, like Enemy Mine, The Last Starfighter. I'm trying to think, what other 80s like science fiction films came out around that time period? It kind of reminds me of those movies. So, yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy is a very, very fun movie. It's one of the best comic book and or superhero movies to ever be made. It's absolutely hilarious. The characters are great. The story is actually really good. The effects are awesome, and so is the action. So, yeah, I would give Guardians of the Galaxy a 9 out of 10. So, tune in next time as I talk about Avengers Infinity War. No, not Infinity War, Age of Ultron, and the first Ant-Man. So, stay tuned for that. And as always, stay gold.